For the beginning of Chapter 2, we're going to be talking about congruent figures. And it says congruent figures are figures that have the same size and the same shape. So, for example, down below, the triangles that are shown are considered to be congruent. And what that means is the corresponding angles and the corresponding sides are the same measurement. So, if I asked you what angle corresponded to angle B, or what angle was congruent to angle B in the other triangle, you would say angle E. So I could write it like this. Angle B is congruent to angle E. I could do the same thing for angle A. Angle A is congruent. Let me rewrite that. Is congruent to angle D. And finally, angle C is congruent to angle F. I could also switch this around and show you that the corresponding sides are congruent. So I'm going to go ahead and erase what I have so that we can show you the congruencies there. So I could write this. Line BA, or line segment BA, is congruent to ED. So this symbol right here with the squiggly line and the equal sign means congruent. This symbol would represent angle, and the line above 2 letters would be the segment. So I just showed you how to name the corresponding parts. So when we go here, I'm going to show you also how they show it on a picture. So if I went to angle A and I drew in a line like this, and since over here it says it corresponds to angle W, then I would draw in that exact same mark on angle W. So if then I went on to B and X, I would put maybe 2 lines in B and 2 lines on X. And that way I see that they have the same symbols in the corners, and it means that those two are congruent. So then I could come to C and put 3, and Z and put 4. So then I could see which ones corresponded together. Can do the same thing with the sides. AB is congruent to WX. And notice that we're putting the starting angles there together. Or starting letters there together, I should say. So when I come over here, it says the figures are congruent. Name the corresponding angles and the corresponding sides. So we have angles to do, and we have sides. So I'm going to just start with angle J. Angle J is congruent to, now I have to find, do you see how this one sticks out a little bit more? On the other one, it is flipped over, so I have to be careful. It's congruent to angle S. So I'm just going to put one little mark in the corner there. So now I'm going to move on to N. Angle N is congruent to angle T. Okay, so I'm going to go to the right, well, what looks like the right angle here. Angle M is congruent to angle V. Angle L is congruent to angle Q. And finally, angle K is congruent to angle R. So if I went to list the sides, I'm going to just go through on this first triangle. I'll do side JK is congruent to SR. I'm going to do KL is congruent to RQ. LM is congruent to QV. MN is congruent to VT. And finally, NJ is congruent to TS. Two figures are congruent when the corresponding angles and corresponding sides are congruent. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So you'll notice here that angle B and E have the same marking, so that means that those two sides correspond and they are congruent. The sides now use these hash marks. So since these sides both have one hash mark, that means they're corresponding and they're congruent. The next one is 2, and the next one has 3. So that's how we show that they are corresponding sides and that they are congruent. What square is congruent to square A? Remember that we said that the sides and the angles have to be congruent in order for them to be, need to be the same in order for them to be congruent. It says each square has 4 right angles, so corresponding angles are congruent. Check to see if the corresponding sides are congruent. So with A, square C would be the one that's congruent because it has the same side lengths. In example 3, it says that these two trapezoids are congruent. So that means we can make certain assumptions. It means that the corresponding angles and the corresponding sides are congruent. So we want to know the length of JM. Since JM corresponds to AD, I'm going to write that down. AD is congruent to JM. So that means JM equals 10 feet. So I could go ahead and label this as 10 feet. I could label both of these sides as 8 feet and the top as 6 feet. So the perimeter, remember that's the distance around the outside. We have 8 plus 6 plus 8 plus 10. So that gives us 14 plus 8 plus 10 gives us 22 plus 10 gives us 32. And we've got a label of feet. Which square from example 2 is congruent to square D? So we've got another option right here. And if we look up here, the only one that has a side length of 9 would be square B. So I could write square B is congruent to square D. In example 3, which angle, JKLM, corresponds to angle C? So I'm looking at angle C, and it looks like angle C corresponds with angle L. So angle C would be congruent to angle L. What is the length of side KJ? KJ is going to be 8 feet. Your homework is the worksheet that I have printed out for you in class. If you have questions, please email me at sullivana@milton.k12.wi.us. Please make sure that you're using the appropriate signs in order to label your homework. So I want to see the congruency signs, I want to see the angle signs, and I want to see the line above the sides to make sure that you're denoting the correct mathematical connotation. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to email me.